Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Islamic podcast. Just wanted to make a video regarding the debate that happened between Jake, the Muslim metaphysician, and Aron Ra. I just want to make an example out of Aron Ra.
I should turn every Uruk here on you, but no. Instead, I will make an example of you.
And see exactly what's going wrong here. So let's take a look and see what he says, and then I'll make my response, inshallah.
Thank you. To my experience, believers hate nothing more than the burden of proof, and that's why they try to redefine what evidence means so that it is no longer a fact that indicates. Because they can't give you any facts, not to point their way, so they give arguments instead of evidence, essentially word games trying to define their God into existence.
Look at this dude.
With erroneous or fallacious assumptions built into most of them. If you ever look at a list of logical fallacies, you might notice that every one of them has been used as an argument for God, and in my experience, every argument for God involves at least one logical fallacy and usually more than one.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
And as I'm sure we will both demonstrate in our upcoming discussion, at which time I will claim that as one of many facts and evidence in my case against God. Of course, the first fact in evidence against God is that there is no evidence for God. We have to start there because logically, having no reason to believe something is a pretty good reason not to believe it, especially when such is neither probable nor even possible.
So this guy rejects all of legal system because most of the legal system and laws are based on arguments. They're not based on evidence. This guy is so stupid. He doesn't understand that evidence by itself doesn't prove anything. I know that this may sound shocking to some idiot atheists like this, but yeah, evidence by itself doesn't prove anything. For example, imagine if I said that, I think Aron Ra killed someone. What's my evidence for that? Oh, he has a knife in his home, so he must have killed someone. The thing is that, yes, you could technically say that I do have evidence to prove that Aron Ra killed someone. I have evidence he has knives in his house. This proves that, he killed someone. But of course, that doesn't prove anything because the argument is not sound, right? And that's where it comes to. It's not the evidence. Anyone can have evidence. A flat earther has evidence that Earth is flat. It's their argument that's bad. Okay, it's not the evidence. Anyone can have anyone can claim anything to be an evidence. So the reason he's saying this is because he doesn't want to deal with the arguments that a theist brings to prove why God exists. So in order to dismiss that, he's saying that, argument doesn't prove anything. Bring me evidence. Show me evidence that God exists. But the thing is, evidence by itself doesn't mean anything. What counts as evidence differs from people to people. For example, for a child, the testimony of his parents is evidence. For a scientist, even if you can demonstrate something to be true through experimentation, even that might not be enough, right? For some people. So what do you mean by evidence? And that's the thing. Because the thing is that when he says evidence, he's obviously referring to scientific evidence, right? Or he's referring to materialistic, naturalistic evidence. So he already defined what evidence is. And this is where it boils down to. He's using circular reasoning. Why should we accept his definition of evidence, right? So basically, here's how he's arguing in a circle. Or most atheists argue in a circle. They say, we define what evidence is. Your definition of evidence does not match ours. Therefore, we define what evidence is. Now, it's completely circular. You just assume what evidence is without even justifying why that should be accepted by everyone. Right? And that's the thing. This is an epistemological debate, right? You have to define what do you mean by evidence. If you don't define it and only accept the things that you already believe to be true, you're just going in a circle because you already defined what evidence is. So there's no way for me to prove anything to you, right? So when you have a worldview like that, of course, it's impossible to prove God exists, right? Because you're not going to accept it. You already assumed what evidence is, and evidence is what you assume evidence is. Therefore, no matter what evidence we bring, you're not going to accept it. So, then what's the point of arguing? And that's the thing. What's funny is that this atheist actually believe in blind faith. They believe in dogmatism, scientific dogmatism. And then you say that only evidence can prove or disprove something. But the thing is, that itself is an argument. It's not a good one. So he himself said that we don't use arguments. we don't accept arguments, then he makes an argument. Like, he's contradicting himself in the same kind of like sentence. Like, so stupid. But regardless, let's continue.
We don't get to say that anything is possible because we know of too many things that are not. A cow cannot jump over the moon, for example. That's not just improbable, that's physically impossible. In order to say whether something is possible, there must be a precedent or parallel or verified phenomenon indicating that such possibility exists. You don't have that for gods or ghosts or demons or souls or for magical enchantments like blessings or curses. So not only is none of that evident, it's not even a possibility to consider.
So here he's saying that in order for something to be true, it has to be something that's natural, or it has to be something that has happened in the past. That's like me saying that I have only seen black cows, therefore only black cows exist. Like, it doesn't follow. It's so stupid. So yeah, this is a classic example of argument for ignorance. It's a logical fallacy. Just because something hasn't happened in the past doesn't mean that, it can't happen in the future. Same way, just because you don't have evidence for something doesn't mean that it can't happen. It doesn't exist. The reason why this is fallacious is because there's a lot of things that exist in the world that we don't have evidence for. Like, for example, there's this game that I recently played. It's called Hitman 3, and it has a very big stage, and there's a lot of NPCs that oftentimes have dialogues and stories that you don't always catch, right? For example, if I were to just play like by myself, I could always like miss a lot of things, a lot of dialogues and whatnot. There's actually a really beautiful moment of like the main protagonist. His name is Agent 47. He's basically like a contract killer, and he goes there in the middle of the rain. And there's this moment where I basically was walking down this bridge, and there's this lady there. She was like just waiting for someone, I think. Basically, she's like an NPC, right? And she has her umbrella with her, and I could have just walked past her and not like wait there or anything like that. But I chose to wait there because there's the option to like relax in different places. So I decided to kind of like blend in and relax. And what's interesting is that this lady starts talking to me, right? And she says that she's actually waiting for a friend. And her friend have become more distant. She kind of misses her friend, right? So it's a cool little kind of like interesting story that adds a lot to the world building. But what's interesting is that if I didn't sat in that place or like kind of like tried to blend in and looked at the river, I would have never come across a story. Does that mean that her story doesn't exist? No, it does exist. I didn't come across it, And this is why you have to understand something called the scope. So what is the scope? The scope is basically what we know, right? Like, for example, the scope of my knowledge is limited. Scope of my knowledge is limited. So anything that's outside of it is something that's not knowledgeable to me. That's not knowable to me, right? But just because it's not knowable to me doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Same example with this game, right? When I'm playing this game, it could very well be possible that I completely missed that NPC dialogue and I just went on to do my mission. But because I went there and I decided to blend in, I was able to get this dialogue, right? And that happens in real world because the thing is that there are billions and billions of people in the world, and we have no idea what they're doing or the fact that they even exist. I mean, right now, someone could be in an ambulance fighting for his life. I wouldn't know anything about this. I wouldn't even know that person exists. I mean, right now, someone could be watching TV. Someone could be killing someone. Someone could be marrying someone. Like, I don't know. I have no idea. Just because I have no idea or I have no evidence that these people exist doesn't mean that they don't exist. Of course not. This is why it's a fallacy, because just because you don't have evidence for something doesn't necessarily mean that that thing doesn't exist. It's just that within the scope of our knowledge, right, it's very limited. So based on that, we cannot say whether something is either true or false, right? That's why it doesn't follow. It doesn't logically follow. Like, the thing is that, of course, there are evidence that he exists. Things like intelligent design, things like fine-tuning, right? But even if I were to accept that there is no evidence, that still wouldn't disprove God. So then how can you, based on your limited knowledge, say that God doesn't exist? How? It doesn't logically follow. It's impossible. You can never claim that.
Believers can't even give a consistent definition of what their God is supposed to be. Neuroscientists understand the mind to be an emergent property of the brain. So the notion of a disembodied mind is nonsense, as Jake just pointed out himself.
here he's committing the faulty comparison fallacy. Like, for example, if a God did exist, he would be nothing like his existence, because he created existence. So if he did exist, he wouldn't be anything like his creation, right? Like, so for example, that's like me saying, if I build a house, I would be just like the house. No, of course not. Of course, I'll be different than the house, right? Same way, if God exists, he's not going to be anything like human beings. So this idea that, if God exists, he has to exist in like some kind of like physical state, is just false. Also in Islam, we don't accept anthropomorphism. So it's just a stupid point to make.
Because every supposedly God-breathed doctrine is full of errors. For example, everything the Bible or the Quran says about the Earth in relation to the rest of the cosmos is flat Earth cosmology from the Iron Age.
Show me the evidence. Show me the evidence.
So they couldn't have been written or given or dictated by any gods or angels because they would have known better. We have sufficient evidence in science to prove that Adam and Eve are genetically impossible and were not real people. The global population cannot have been derived from a single couple, not 6,000 years ago, nor even 600,000 years ago. We descend from a particular population of apes, numbering several thousand strong at least, who set out on the road to our lineage at least a few million years ago. To be clear, this
Also, he's using a logical fallacy known as appeal to authority. He's assuming whatever scientists say is true. Again, this goes back to the same problem of scientific realism. Science doesn't tell you whether something is true or false. It just tells you like things that are important to keep yourself alive. It's just a useful tool. That's it. Like, it doesn't tell you whether something is true or false. So in case you guys don't know, I feel like I need to make this distinction. There is two positions when it comes to science. There is scientific realism, then there is scientific instrumentalism. Scientific realism posits that whatever science says is true. Scientific instrumentalism says that science doesn't tell us whether something is true or false. It's just something that's useful. That's why we use it, right? And that's the thing, right? Because the thing is that if you say that science leads to truth, then how do you justify all the scientific theories that were proven false, right? It doesn't follow. And also, science is based on limited knowledge. So then how do you know whether something is true or false? Because our knowledge is limited. There's just no getting away from it. So it's a very bad position to take. Also, he says flat earth, like show us evidence anywhere from either the Quran or the Sunnah that says the earth is flat. Like in a clear-cut term. It doesn't exist, right? The Quran, the cosmology in Islam doesn't say anything about the earth or the shape of the earth. Whether it's flat or whether it's round, it doesn't say anything. Or it is nothing clearly, right?
Archaeologists assure us that the same goes for the Tower of Babel and even the Exodus. Historians agree that Moses never existed. He was a legendary character, but he wasn't real. Then paleontologists, geologists, geneticists, and practically any other earth and life scientist can disprove the global flood of Noah's Ark. The Bible and the Quran both imply that this was a global event, flooding the whole world, and that everyone alive today is a descendant of Noah. But we have literally tons of rock-solid proof from many independent fields of study that it's just a story.
Again, he's just saying, oh, believe us because I said so. Believe the scientists because I said so. Whatever science is real.
The One Piece is real!
Don't believe, anything else. And I don't need to bring any evidence. I just can, whatever the scientists say, believe it. Like, he bring no argument other than, we know that this scientist, they say X is true, therefore X is true. Like, he has no evidence for anything. He doesn't have an argument. I mean, why should we accept what the scientists say? Like, at least make the argument that the scientists are making. Like, if the scientists are saying that we have no evidence that certain historical event happened, then that's a fallacious argument. Because just because you don't have evidence for something doesn't mean that it never happened. Theists, they believe this based on faith. They don't say that, this is something we can prove. There's also another article published in Nature. It says the following. Alistair Ruffell could see that there was something odd about the rocks near his childhood home in Somerset, UK. The deposits hail from a Triassic period more than 200 million years ago, and most are a dull orange red, signifying that they formed when the region was a parched landscape, baked by the sun. Nothing strange there. But outcrops on Somerset's Lipe Hill have a thin stripe of grey running through the heart of the red stone. That band signals a time when arid desert disappeared and the region transformed into a swampy wetland. And for some reason, an incredibly dry climate had turned wet and stayed that way for more than a million years. About 232 million years ago, during a span known as the Carnian Age, it rained for almost everywhere. After millions of years of dry climate, Earth entered a wet period lasting 1 million to 2 million years. Nearly any place where geologists find rocks of that age, there were signs of wet weather. Now, of course, this doesn't prove that, the entire Earth flooded, but it does prove that it did rain and a very dry Earth became wet. Okay? Again, it's very much possible that the Great Flood happened between this time period. Okay? And if it did happen in this time period, we could argue that we have evidence that it might have happened in this time period. I'm not saying this exactly proves that it did happen, but it's possible. Right? So again, the possibility is there. It's not something that's completely impossible. So basically all he did is just use argument from ignorance. He used argument from scientific realism. He used circular reasoning and already assumed what evidence is and already assumed materialism and naturalism. All of these three things, we have no reason to accept them. We have no logical reason to accept them. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. Inshallah, I'll see you guys next time. And if you guys like the video, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And please do subscribe to the channel. I have noticed that I'm losing a lot of my subscribers. I don't know why this is happening, but YouTube hates me. So please support me by subscribing to the channel. I would really appreciate it. And as you guys know, I'm a very small channel, so any subscription helps. And if you want to support me, then you can support me by becoming a Patreon or by becoming a YouTube member. Thanks for watching.